The morning at the harbor was loud and full of life. Boat engines roared, thick ropes slapped against shiny hulls, and the air was a heavy mix of diesel fuel and salty sea spray. Seagulls screamed overhead, circling in the bright sky. I stepped out of the taxi, my heart pounding. I was clutching my small, worn suitcase. It felt like it held everything I had left in the world. And then I saw them. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're joining from. Drop a comment and tell me your city. And after you've heard my whole story, be honest. What would you have done in my situation? Tell me in the comments below. We read every single one. Now, let's begin. My Uncle Greg was standing near the boarding area for a big, fancy yacht. He had his arms crossed over his chest, looking proud and important. He was surrounded by my cousins and a group of men in very expensive, tailored suits. Their loud, confident laughter carried over the sound of the crashing waves. "Well, look who finally washed up," Greg said. His grin was sharp and nasty, like it could cut glass. He looked me up and down. "You're here to wave goodbye, Lily, not to come along. Don't get confused, sweetheart." The others around him chuckled. They shook their heads, as if making fun of me was a normal, family tradition. My cousin Natalie leaned toward me. She whispered, but she made sure it was loud enough for everyone to hear. "Guess someone didn't get the memo. This trip is only for actual shareholders of the company." I felt my jaw tighten. I had promised myself I wouldn't react. Not today. I would not give them the satisfaction. Greg's eyes scanned my old blazer and my scuffed shoes. His smirk grew wider. "Still playing dress-up in your bargain rack wardrobe, I see. Honey, this is a yacht club. This isn't the public pier where you look for handouts." His words hurt more than they should have. Maybe because for years, I had just stood there and taken it. After my kind and hard-working father died, Greg had swooped in and taken control of his shipping company. He left me with nothing but a stack of sympathy cards and an eviction notice from my own childhood home. He told everyone I was too emotional, too weak, and too soft to handle the tough world of business. And for a long, long time, I believed he was right. I felt broken, but not anymore. Suddenly, a deep, powerful rumble started up behind me. It was the sound of a massive engine, much bigger than any of the others in the harbor. Heads turned all across the dock. A sleek, stunningly beautiful white yacht glided smoothly into view. The morning sun bounced off its chrome edges, making it look like it was on fire. Its name, the Seraphine, was painted in elegant, shimmering silver letters on the side. Crew members, dressed in perfect navy blue uniforms, stood in a straight, silent line on the deck. Then, a man in a captain's hat walked down the ramp toward the dock. His posture was straight, and his face was calm and serious. The laughter from my family group suddenly stopped. Greg frowned, his eyes narrowing. "What's this?" he demanded, his voice loud. "Who's pulling that thing in here?" The captain ignored him completely. He walked right up to me and removed his hat, holding it respectfully against his chest. "Miss Lily Morgan?" he asked, his voice firm and clear. I met his steady gaze. "That's me," I replied. He gave a single, respectful nod. "I am Captain Harris. Ma'am, your yacht is fully fueled and prepared for departure. Do I have your permission to escort you aboard?" The entire dock fell into a stunned silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Greg blinked, his smug smirk collapsing into confusion. "Her what?" Captain Harris didn't even glance in his direction. He kept his eyes on me. "Your yacht, ma'am," he repeated, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. A wave of shocked murmurs spread through the crowd. Natalie let out a small, confused laugh that died in her throat. Greg's important business partners started whispering to each other, looking very uneasy. I took a slow, deep breath, feeling a calmness settle over me. It was the kind of calm that only comes when you know you have already won. I stepped right past my uncle. "Wait a minute," Greg sputtered, stumbling forward. "Your yacht. Since when?" I turned slightly, meeting his shocked eyes. "Since the ownership transfer went through last week," I said, my voice even. "You should really pay more attention to what you're signing, Uncle Greg, especially when you're celebrating too hard at your parties." The color drained from Greg's face, leaving him pale. You tricked me," he accused, his voice trembling. "No," I said softly. "I just finally stopped letting you trick me." Captain Harris gestured gracefully toward the beautiful yacht. "Ma'am, your crew is ready when you are." "Thank you, Captain," I said. I stepped forward. My heels made a sharp, clear sound on the wooden dock. Click, 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 each step echoing through the silence my uncle had left behind. As I reached the bottom of the ramp, I glanced back one last time. Greg stood completely frozen. The powerful uncle who once controlled everything now looked small, lost, and confused. "You always told me I didn't belong here," I said, my voice quiet but strong enough for him to hear. "Maybe you were right. I don't belong with you. Then, I turned my back on them. I walked up the ramp, my old suitcase in my hand. The sunlight caught the simple gold band on my wrist, the one my dad had given me before he died. It was engraved with a message, for the one who will bring it home. The Seraphine's engines roared louder. The water surged beneath us as the yacht began to move away from the dock. I stood at the railing and watched as the harbor started to shrink behind me. Greg, Natalie, all of them. They just became small, fading figures. Captain Harris approached me again. "Where to, Miss Morgan?" he asked. I looked out toward the wide, open horizon, where the blue sky melted into the even bluer sea. "Forward, Captain," I said quietly. "Full speed ahead." The yacht surged forward, powerfully slicing through the water. As the cool, salty spray hit my face, I realized something amazing. For the first time in years, I wasn't running away from my past. I was sailing straight through it. Out on the open water, my phone began to vibrate nonstop in my pocket. Missed calls, text messages, emails, all from Greg. I let them pile up, a digital monument to his panic. I stood on the deck, the strong ocean wind whipping through my hair, and I could still see his face in my mind. That exact moment when his confidence had shattered. That tiny flicker of fear behind all his arrogance. I had waited years to see that look. And yet, underneath my feeling of satisfaction, there was a quiet ache. Maybe it was because, despite everything, he was still family. Or maybe it was because the moment reminded me of just how long I had lived trapped in the shadow he cast. Captain Harris's voice gently interrupted my thoughts. "Ma'am, we are clear of the harbor. Would you like to review the itinerary for the day?" "Not yet, Captain," I said. "Could you please bring me the satellite phone?" He nodded and went to fetch it. When the phone was in my hand, I finally pressed the button to call Greg back. He answered on the first ring. "You think this is funny, Lily?" His voice was sharp, trembling with pure rage. "You think you can humiliate me in front of everyone I know?" "I didn't humiliate you, Greg," I said, my voice perfectly even. "You did that to yourself. You tricked me into signing that transfer," he yelled. "I didn't trick you," I cut in, my tone firm. "You were too busy celebrating your own ego to ever notice the fine print. The same arrogance that made you steal Dad's company is the same arrogance that made you lose it." He went silent for a moment. I could hear him breathing heavily, trying to control his anger. "You'll pay for this," he finally hissed. "I'll make sure of it." I smiled a faint, tired smile. "You said that to me when you fired me from the company mailroom. How did that turn out for you?" Then, I simply hung up. I looked at my reflection in the glass of the cabin window. I didn't see the sad, quiet girl they used to mock. I saw someone sharper, stronger, and completely unafraid to take back what was rightfully hers. Down below deck, I opened the small, secure safe. Inside were the files my father had hidden behind an old family painting. It had taken me years to find them and piece their story together. There were contracts, stock ledgers, and clear proof of Greg's forgery and theft. But I hadn't brought them just to destroy him financially. I brought them because the truth needed to see the light of day. And tomorrow it would. At sunrise, a major press conference was scheduled back in the main harbor. I would be stepping off the Seraphine, not as Greg's pitied niece, but as the rightful CEO of Morgan Maritime Holdings. The company my father built with his own two hands, now reclaimed by the daughter they had thrown aside. I spent that night reading through my father's handwritten notes in the margins of the old documents. Little messages to himself, like, "Always remember who you are," and "Never fight for revenge. Fight for what is right." Reading those words stung, because somewhere along my difficult journey, I wasn't sure which one I was doing anymore. Just after midnight, there was a soft knock on my cabin door. It was Captain Harris. "Ma'am, we have an urgent call coming through on a secure line." "It's an anonymous source." "Put it through," I said. A low, disguised voice came on the line. "Miss Morgan, you don't know me, but your uncle isn't finished. He's meeting with his most loyal investors tonight. He's trying to rally them, to reclaim control of the board before your big announcement tomorrow." I gripped the phone tighter. "Where?" I asked. "The Grand Harbor Hotel," the voice said. "The conference room on the top floor." I exhaled slowly, looking out at the dark, endless stretch of water ahead. Greg was predictable. He was desperate, but he was predictable. "Change our course, Captain," I told Harris, my decision made. "New destination, the Grand Harbor docks." He hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Understood, ma'am." As the Seraphine turned smoothly, the glittering lights of the city began to rise in the distance, sharp, golden, and waiting for me. My heart was thudding in my chest, not with fear, but with a deep sense of purpose. Tomorrow wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about closure. And by the time the sun came up, Greg would finally understand what it felt like to lose everything, the same way he had made me lose everything. By the time the Seraphine docked at Grand Harbor, The night was giving way to a cold, silver dawn. The city skyline shimmered in the early light, a forest of glass and steel that never forgave weakness. I walked off the yacht's ramp with calm precision. I was dressed in a simple, well-tailored navy blue suit, my hair pulled back neatly. My father's gold band was hidden beneath my cuff. Captain Harris followed me silently until we reached the gate. "Stay here with the ship, Captain," I said. "This part is mine alone." Inside the Grand Harbor Hotel, the marble floors were so shiny I could see my reflection in them. People in expensive suits rushed past me, heading to their early meetings, completely unaware of the storm that was about to break on the top floor. The elevator ride up felt long. I didn't rehearse any words. I didn't need to. When you are armed with the truth, the right words come all on their own. When the elevator doors opened, the air in the hallway was thick, with the smell of coffee, expensive cologne, and pure desperation. I followed the sound of raised voices to a conference room with a long glass table. Greg was there, pacing back and forth. His suit jacket was off, his sleeves were rolled up, and his face was tight, with a panic he was trying to disguise as authority. He was surrounded by board members and a few key investors. The moment he saw me standing in the doorway, his whole body froze. "You shouldn't be here," he snapped. "Funny," I said, walking calmly into the room. "That's exactly what you told me at Dad's funeral." The room fell completely silent. All the board members turned to look at me, unsure whether to throw me out or stay to watch the show. I placed my thick, worn folder right in the middle of the glass table. "Everything you've done to this company, Greg, is in here. The secret shell accounts, the fake signatures, the shady deals you made using our father's good name. It's all here." Greg's hand twitched, as if he wanted to snatch the folder away. "You don't know what you're talking about. These are lies." "Don't," I said, my voice low but firm enough to silence him. "You've been lying for years. But this time, you signed the truth, with your own name." An older board member, Mr. Alvarez, a man with a wise and cautious face, leaned forward. "Is this true, Greg?" he asked, his voice grave. "These documents appear to bear your signature." Greg's jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. "She manipulated them. She's just a bitter, angry girl because her father didn't leave her in charge." I let out a slow, steady breath. "My father left everything in a trust, to be given to me when I turned 30. You were supposed to protect it for me. Instead, you drained it. You turned his honest company into your own personal playground." He slammed his fist down on the table, making the coffee cups rattle. "You think they'll believe you? You're just a kid who used to beg me for lunch money." His cruel words echoed in the sudden quiet. And in that silence, something shifted. Every person in the room looked from my calm face to his red, angry one. Every investor saw the cracks in his story widening. I reached into my bag and placed a small, simple digital recorder on the table. "Then maybe they'll believe your own words," I said. I pressed play. His own voice, slurred from too much whiskey during one of his many celebration nights, filled the room. "She'll never find out. The papers are already signed. Her name's on them, but she's too stupid to know what they mean. By the time she figures it out, I'll be long gone. Untouchable." Greg went deathly pale. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The evidence of his own betrayal had trapped him. "Dad trusted you," I said, my voice softening with a sadness I couldn't hide. "And you made me believe I wasn't smart enough or strong enough to carry his name. But I learned, Greg. I studied every part of this business. I built my own team of good, honest people. And while you were busy showing off your yachts and your new friends, I was building something real, something Dad would be proud of." Mr. Alvarez stood up, his expression stern and final. "This meeting is over," he announced to the room. "The board will convene privately immediately. Miss Morgan," he said, turning to me, "you will be contacted within the hour to begin the formal reinstatement procedures." I gave him a single, respectful nod. Then I turned my eyes to Greg. He was sweating, his eyes were bloodshot, and he looked utterly defeated. "You wanted power so badly," I said quietly, so only he could hear. "Now you'll get to see what it feels like when it's all gone." As I walked back toward the elevator, I could hear the muffled voices erupting behind me. Board members shouting, Greg desperately pleading, the sound of his stolen empire crumbling into dust. When the elevator door slid shut, I finally exhaled, leaning back against the wall. The city stretched out below the glass elevator, bathed in the golden light of a new morning. For the first time, the woman I saw reflected in the glass didn't just look like a survivor. She looked like a leader, and as the elevator descended, one clear thought burned steadily in my chest. I hadn't come here to destroy him. I had come to reclaim everything he was so sure I could never earn. The next morning broke bright, clear, and windless. It was the kind of perfect morning that felt like it belonged to someone who had fought hard to earn it. The city was already awake, and the news was spreading everywhere. Headlines flashed across finance news channels and online feeds. Morgan Maritime returns to rightful heir. And Greg Morgan under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. I stood on the balcony of my hotel suite, a cup of coffee cooling and untouched beside me. I watched the ocean stretch out to the horizon. Down below, the Seraphine rocked gently at the private dock, its white hull gleaming brilliantly under the rising sun. The world knew the truth now. Greg's empire was falling fast. His bank accounts were frozen, and his so-called friends and allies were running away as fast as they could. His name, once the proud crown of our family, was now being dragged through the very same mud he always told me I belonged in. But even with all the victorious headlines, I didn't feel like celebrating. I felt quiet, peaceful. For years, revenge had been the fuel that kept me going. Every decision, every sleepless night, every single sacrifice was for this one goal, to take back what was stolen. And now that I had it, all I could think about was my dad's voice, from one of his notes. When you win, Lily, make sure it's not hate that's leading you. A soft knock pulled me from my thoughts. Captain Harris stood in the doorway, holding his cap in his hands. The press conference begins in 30 minutes, ma'am, he said. I nodded, picking up my blazer. Let's go. The harbor was packed. Reporters were crowded together near a podium that had been set up on the pier. Camera flashes went off like little lightning strikes. Employees of Morgan Maritime, both old and new, lined the sides. Their faces looked uncertain, but also hopeful. As I stepped out of the car, I could almost feel their whispers on the wind. That's her. That's the niece they said was gone for good. She's back. Captain Harris walked a few steps behind me, a quiet, respectful presence as we moved through the crowd toward the podium. It was the same dock where Greg had humiliated me, just a day before. When I reached the microphone, I paused. The crowd hushed. The waves crashed gently against the piers, and for the first time in years my hands weren't trembling. My father, Daniel Morgan, built this company from nothing, I began, my voice steady but thick with emotion. He believed in people who worked hard. He believed in earning your place. Somewhere along the way, that legacy was twisted into something ugly, into greed and manipulation. I looked out at the crowd, making eye contact with the people who mattered most. But that ends today. I turned my gaze toward the rows of employees, men and women with weathered hands and wrinkled faces, people who had been loyal to my father long before power and money changed hands. This company was never about the yachts, or the expensive suits, or the family name, I said, my voice growing stronger. It was always about the people who keep the engines running, the ships sailing, and the lights on. You were always the heart of Morgan Maritime, and you still are. Applause started to ripple through the crowd. It was hesitant at first, and then it grew, rising into a strong, warm wave of sound. I saw the faces of the old-timers, the ones who had worked side by side with my dad. They looked proud. Some had tears in their eyes, and they were clapping harder than anyone else. A reporter called out, "Miss Morgan, what about your uncle? What happens to Greg now?" I met her gaze squarely. My uncle will face the consequences of his actions, like anyone else. But today isn't about him. This isn't about revenge anymore. It's about rebuilding what was broken. And that means not just the company, but the trust, too. Flashbulbs exploded around me, but I didn't flinch. For the first time, I felt like I truly belonged on that dock. Not as the outcast niece, not as the quiet girl watching from the sidelines, but as the woman who was now ready to steer her own ship. Later that afternoon, when the crowds were gone, I walked alone along the pier where it had all begun. The air still smelled of salt and memory. I could almost hear Greg's laughter from the day before, cruel, sharp, and echoing. But now, it sounded distant. And small. I stopped at the exact spot where he had said, "You're here to wave goodbye, not to come along." The same wooden boards creaked beneath my feet, but now they seemed to whisper a different message. "Not anymore," I murmured to myself. I heard footsteps approaching from behind. I turned. It was Greg. He wasn't wearing a suit this time, just a plain windbreaker. His eyes were sunken, and his face was drawn. He looked years older, and somehow smaller. "I had to see it," he said quietly, his voice rough. "The dock, the yacht, you." I didn't say anything. I just waited. He swallowed hard, looking out at the Seraphine. "You won, Lily. You got everything. The company, the name, the respect." He shook his head slowly, finally meeting my eyes. I guess you were always stronger than I thought." The words sounded strange coming from him. It wasn't a real apology, not exactly, but it was something close to a surrender. "I never wanted to destroy you, Greg," I said softly. "I just wanted the truth to be known. I wanted what was right." He nodded slowly, his eyes glistening with a regret that had come far too late. "Your father," he whispered. "He would have been so proud of you." Maybe it was true. Maybe it wasn't. But either way, I didn't need to hear it from him anymore. I let him turn and walk away without another word. Some victories don't need an audience. That night, the Seraphine sailed again. The city lights shimmered in the distance like a blanket of stars as the powerful engines hummed steadily beneath my feet. I stood at the very front of the yacht, the wind in my hair, watching the horizon stretch out before me like a promise. Captain Harris approached quietly. "Destination, ma'am?" he asked. I smiled a faint, peaceful smile. "Anywhere new, Captain," I said. "Somewhere peaceful." He nodded and turned away, calling out soft commands to the crew. As the yacht cut smoothly through the dark, quiet water, I looked down at my reflection in the waves. I didn't see the woman who had been laughed at. I didn't see the girl who had lost everything. I saw the woman who had found herself again. The dock, with all its pain and memories, was behind me. The wide, open sea was ahead. And for the very first time, I wasn't chasing revenge. I was sailing, finally, and completely, toward my freedom.